Hello everyone, this is Highlander from MTG Cardsmith doing another custom Magic the Gathering card review. And today we're reviewing a card by a new Cardsmith, kind of. This is by Islandsnake, our good friend. And okay, I guess on the forums his name is Doc Proxy. But these are his first two. Well, there's two cards. This is the first of two of his first custom cards ever made, which is really cool. And also, he doesn't actually play Magic really, so I expect there to be issues with the cards. But you know, let's see what happens. So what do we got here? We got a veteran Sellsword. This guy is 3 mana for a rare, a human, and a 2/5. First off, I want to say that 3 mana for a 2/5 is quite above the curve. So if you basically just add these together, you get a 7, right? Now, generally, when you're talking a rare, you could probably get away with 6 points of stat, so like a 3/3, a 4/2, a 2/4. That's usually considered above the curve, or just about the curve, I would say, at least for a rare. 2/5 is a little bit high. Basically, this guy will stop any aggression in its tracks when you play this guy. 2/5 is very large. And also strange on a red card, because red is often, almost always, a very aggressive color, and a little. It's not unheard of to have cards that have low power and high toughness in red, but it's pretty rare, especially for this guy. I mean, look at him. He's got this big sword. Look at his bicep. He's got this big bicep. You tell me that's a 2 bicep? I think that's bigger than a 2 bicep. Okay, just saying. All right, so let's read the text. Oh, I also want to point out that usually when you not always, but usually you have 2 subtypes for creatures. It'll be like race and then sort of like a class. So for example, this guy could be a human warrior. All right, that's generally how these things go. Sometimes not. Sometimes you'll just see human, or for certain creatures, like say a squid, you'll just say creature squid, right? But this guy's a pretty easy human warrior, if you ask me. So I could probably throw that on there as well. Okay, so this guy's got menace, and whenever veteran Sellsword becomes blocked, put a loyalty counter on each creature blocking it. Oh, there's a little bit of an issue here. So loyalty counters are actually already a type of counter, but it goes on planeswalkers. And I think that this should probably be a different type of counter. Veteran Sellsword can block any number of creatures with loyalty counters on them. Okay. Veteran Sellsword has protection from creatures with loyalty counters on them and deals no combat damage to those creatures. Okay, so basically the way this guy works is... Let me sip my tea. Okay, so if you just play him and he sort of just sits back as a blocker, then he's just a 2/5 blocker, which is quite strong against an aggressive deck. But again, in red, it's a little strange. But basically, whenever he becomes blocked, you put a loyalty... So he needs to be blocked by 2 or more creatures, right? So let's say you play this, they block with 2 creatures. Each of those creatures gets loyalty counters on them. And then he can block any number of creatures with loyalty counters on them, and he has protection from creatures with loyalty counters on them and deals no combat damage to those creatures. So he becomes friends, basically, with whoever blocks him. Yeah, so I think this design has quite a few issues, unfortunately. The way it feels like to me is so okay. So let's think about this for a minute. So if you attack and your opponent blocks with two creatures, this guy's gonna they can never attack again. Those creatures, as long as Veteran Sellsword is around, those creatures can never attack because this guy can block any of them and has protection from them. But he also deals no damage to them. So if you ever block this guy, you're basically marking your creatures as these creatures can no longer attack as long as Veteran Sellsword is around. And then after that, Veteran Sellsword can continue to attack, and those creatures can no longer block him. I see. So basically, okay, so essentially what's going on here is this guy is basically just a 2/5 unblockable, right? Because the thing is, if your opponent ever blocks this guy, they save themselves 2 damage, but essentially 2 of their creatures can now no longer block the Veteran Sellsword. Excuse me. But the Veteran Sellsword can block them. So essentially, this guy is unblockable until like the opponents really got to block him, like until their health is like really really low, right? And then they sort of get the option to block him, but only one time. Then they need new creatures to block him. So that part's kind of interesting, I guess, but it's kind of a very complex way of doing something like that. Not to mention the fact that he can then block any of those creatures, so you can't attack back. So you're really, really, really disincentivized to block this guy, basically. This guy is essentially a 2/5 unblockable. So not only is he a very good attacker, or excuse me, a very good defender, he's also a very good attacker. Because he's essentially unblockable. So, yeah, I have to say I'm not the biggest fan of this design. There's a lot of words here. There's a lot going on, but essentially the effect is very simple, and I think that is. It takes a while to really figure out how this card works. So like imagine you're a new player and you're reading this and you're like, oh, look at all this stuff that's going on. But in essence, all this really does is say like, just don't block this guy until you really have to. I mean, the card's actually very strong. This card is actually very, very strong. Probably too strong. The stats are higher than you would normally see on a three cost card. The fact that he can, he basically makes creatures that block him, excuse me, like not be able to block him again. Excuse me again. And the fact that he can block any number of creatures that have blocked him. So I have to say that the combination of this first ability and this last ability are actually somewhat interesting, I think. I think this middle ability doesn't really need to be there. I think that's just a little bit too much, you know? So, like, you have to block this guy with 2 creatures. He's got Menace, right? So you're essentially saying this guy can then block. I think this guy just sort of dominates the board a little bit too much. Well, this guy basically has 2 modes, right? He's got one mode where he just sits back as a 2/5 blocker, and that's all he does. And then he's got another mode where he's essentially a 2/5 unblockable. So it's like if you're behind, this guy's quite good because he's a good blocker. If you're ahead, this guy's really good because he's a 2 power unblockable. Again, not exactly, but pretty much, right? So that's, I mean, that's good. That's kind of neat. I just think that it's a little bit too complex what we're doing here. Again, I think this middle part can go out. I do think his stats are too high. I think that a 2/5 is just a little bit too much for a 3-mana creature. It's got to be pretty interesting at 2/4, and I'm not sure if the menace is necessary either. Like it feels like the menace kind of puts this over the top, because it means that like anytime you block this guy, you have to block him with 2 creatures, and then those creatures can never block him again, right? What's also kind of actually yeah, he has protection from creatures' loyalty counters, so they can't block him ever again. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, I do think that like some combination of getting rid of this middle ability and maybe the menace will simplify this card enough to where it's a little bit, because there's kind of some interesting ideas here. The fact that like this guy is only blockable once by each creature that's kind of neat. I don't know if I've ever seen that before. And it's certainly an interesting way to give evasion to a red creature. Excuse me. I just think there's a little bit too much going on here, and again, the stats are a little too high. So, like, if this were me, what I would probably do is only have these 2 abilities here. Sorry, let me get out my my pen. Okay, so I would probably get rid of this and this. Let's see what we got going on here. So now whenever he becomes blocked, you put a loyalty counter on each creature blocking it. And he's got protection for creatures' loyalty counters and deal no combat damage to those creatures. So, like, this here I think is enough. This keeps the essence of what this card is supposed to be doing, but doesn't kind of go over the top. And I do think this should be probably like a 2/4. I actually kind of like the low power, given the fact that he's essentially unblockable. But I don't think he needs quite that much toughness. The thing is, like, there's no way to actually kill this guy in combat, which is a little annoying. So, like, I actually think this guy might be better as like a 2/3. Which I know sounds strange for a rare, but I think because of the fact that you can never block this guy in combat, like you can never kill him with blocking with creatures, he needs to be vulnerable to removal, right? And so I think giving him a lower toughness is important in that regard. So I think actually a 2/3 would work for this guy. So at least then he's killable by most types of removal, right? So you can actually deal with him. So I mean, some interesting ideas here. Also, like I'm not quite getting the flavor from this card. I mean, he's a veteran sellsword. Which is essentially a mercenary, right? He's a veteran mercenary. And he makes some sort of a deal with the creatures that he blocks, where he's like, well, you don't block me and I won't hurt you, right? Which is interesting, but I don't know if veteran sellsword is the right way to really sell that. No pun intended. So maybe there's some other name you can give him that will kind of really help explain what's going on here. You can also add some flavor text too. Now, like once you get rid of these 2 abilities, you can add a little bit of flavor text that can sort of help explain what's going on. Excuse me. And the effect doesn't feel particularly red to me. I mean, it's kind of interesting because okay, so presumably you are the one that hired him, right? He's on your side of the field. And then he sort of like creates like a non-aggression pact with the creatures that block him, which doesn't seem very red to me. To be honest, it doesn't seem very white either. Like, I would say white normally, but like white is all about like, I don't know. You would expect a white creature to be loyal to to whoever like summoned him, right? So yeah, I'm not sure exactly where this would fit color-wise. I mean, maybe black, because black is all about kind of doing whatever's best for you. So, you know, this guy kind of like makes his own little bargains. So it's possible that black would actually be the place to have a creature like this. I'm not sure. So anyway, those are my suggestions: is to remove those two abilities. You have to change the name of this counter because it can't be loyalty because planeswalkers get that. And I do think he needs to be a lot lower statted. So given everything that I said, I'll give this card a. I'm going to give this card a 6 out of 10. I think there's actually some interesting ideas here. I'm not exactly sure where it fits, but there's some interesting ideas here. I think this card just needs to be tuned a bit, and I think reflavored a bit. And then I think that some of these concepts can potentially work. So yeah, 6 out of 10 for Veteran Sellsword. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time.